Folks, welcome into another episode of SportsBookReview.com's Roundtable Series videos. Today, we're going to talk a little bit of NFL draft, and we know who's going to get drafted 1 through 5. You have a feeling on who it might be? Well, today, my esteemed panel is going to be the GMs of these teams to make these smart moves. Let's bring them in now. Gary Seegers, Ian Cameron, and Teddy Savransky. Smart moves here in the draft. Gary, I'm going to start with you first. Smart move, right? Get your quarterback, get the franchise guy, Joe Burrow to the Bengals. Or if you're the GM, are you saying, let's shake it up right here and stack the deck with extra picks? But to me, smart move, get your quarterback.
100% get your quarterback. I don't think that they make the moves that they've already made in free agency without thinking that they're going after their quarterback with pick number 1. I think this is as sure a pick as you can possibly get. Now, with that said, if you have somebody like Miami that wants to throw 5 first-round picks at you or something along those lines, absolutely, you got to look at it because you've got more holes to fill than just the quarterback spot. But the smart move, go on and get your quarterback. Go take Joe Burrow.
I mean, it makes all the sense, Ian. You're talking about the Ohio kid returning back to Ohio, be the saving grace. And hey, look, it's not like you're taking a shot in the dark with this kid. Heisman Trophy winner, dominated the SEC. We can arguably say the toughest conference in football. And then also winning the Heisman Trophy, moving on and getting the national championship game. Seems easy, Ian. GM, smart move. Get your quarterback, right?
It is the smart move. Get your quarterback because Andy Dalton ain't it, period. So for the Cincinnati Bengals, it's got to be Joe Burrow in terms of the number 1 pick. And look, there's people that there's still a couple of sticklers out there that are saying this guy came out of nowhere. The LSU season was incredible. He just skyrocketed up everybody's draft board with the season he had at LSU. And people are saying, oh, he had everything ready for him. He had a great O-line. He had great receivers. He had a good system with Joe Brady in basically putting in that pro-style offense with LSU this year once he got hired. And everything was set up well for success for him. And then there's some people, so there are some sticklers out there that say maybe he's not going to be that dominant NFL quarterback. But the eye test tells me that he's ready maybe to be that dominant NFL quarterback. What more do you want the guy to do? He was making good decisions. He was making good throws. He showed you could throw outside of the pocket and make plays when the play broke down as well last year. And he did that so many times for LSU. He's got that athletic, mobile component as well. So for me, I'm in agreement. Cincinnati's got to go with Joe Burrow.
Teddy, they say sometimes keep it simple, stupid. The Bengals taking a quarterback seems like the right approach here, but could they even throw a wrench in and say, yeah, we'll take a quarterback, but we're taking Tua here?
They could, and I wouldn't be shocked to see Tua be the better pro of these two. I would not be shocked. And again, you talk about the difference between 1 year. A year ago, Tua was the quarterback who couldn't miss and the number 1 overall pick and the best pick ever. And Joe Burrow was, maybe he'll get drafted. Obviously, that's changed in 1 year. A pretty good year for LSU. But if they were going to make a move like that, they would trade down. I think. I think Burrow has established himself as the number 1, and that someone would pay a premium, in theory, to go up and get him. But anytime I have the number 1 overall pick, I'm always listening to deals. Okay, because look at how many number 1 picks have come and crashed and burned over and over again, and the can't miss QB. Hey, we just did a video talking about 2 of the can't miss QB prospects who were drafted number 1 in Cam Newton and Jameis Winston, and there's dozens of others who have not brought their teams to the promised land. So yeah, hope springs eternal. Burrow goes number 1. If I'm Cincy and I could trade out of that pick, I'd do it in a New York minute.
Yeah, it's interesting. Gary, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation here. Teddy brings up the point when you're looking at quarterbacks. I mean, the ultimate boom or bust game is quarterbacks. Now we sit in that 2 spot with the Redskins. That new regime comes in. I think you have a surefire Pro Bowl caliber, non-bustable player in Chase Young sitting there for you. But new coach comes in, new regime. Maybe the quarterback last year, they don't like what they see, and they say, boy, you know what? We got a quarterback here that we have our eyes on. Or do you just sit back and say, you're the GM, Gary, smart move. Don't muck it up and just take the guy, number 2, Chase Young here.
100% you take Chase Young, no questions asked, unless, again, you get a king's ransom for that number 2 pick. You can trade down, you can get some edge help and whatnot, but look, the Redskins last year, 29th in defensive line rating, 26th in defense per drive rating. They were not good on that side of the ball. Now, some of that had to do with Jay Gruden being fired in the middle of the year. Maybe the team quit. Maybe they just didn't, there's a lot that could go into that. They do have talent on defense, but they need a lot more. Chase Young would sure up a lot of holes on that defensive side.
I agree, Ian. I'm going to bring you back into this conversation and talk about the Redskins taking that defensive lineman, because even reading around the league, we see some reports come out that after the Lions pick number 3, nobody's even contacted Chase Young, would let you know that the Redskins have probably zeroed in on their guy. If I'm a new regime and I have a defensive-minded head coach and a stud pass rusher, and let's not forget, Ian, pass rushers out of Ohio State last couple of years been doing pretty good in the NFL. I think the same thing here. Smart move just to take the D end, or hey, maybe I'm going to listen to offers. I'm going to trade in, and I like a quarterback more than I like a defensive end pass rusher here.
I think it's absolute nonsense, Donnie, hearing people say they might look quarterback. I mean, you're going to just throw – I know Dwayne Haskins, we've got concerns here about his viability right now at the NFL level, but you can't just draft him where you did last year and give up on him after 1 year. You got to stick with it, see what he can do this year and moving forward. I think it's just like you guys said, it's going to be Chase Young. Now, the concern here is Chase Young in the big spots, the Big Ten championship game, the playoff game last year against Clemson. Not necessarily his best games in those 2 games, but is that going to totally eradicate and override the overall body of work that he's had throughout his career at Ohio State, where he's been a dominant pass rusher at the college level and has the skill set to do it at the pro level? I don't think so. So for Washington, it's an obvious need. They were right there with some of the worst teams in the NFL in terms of fewest sacks, fewest quarterback pressures. Chase Young can fill a lot of those problems and answer a lot of those problems. So I think that's where they go.
Ted, if we ask around the NFC East right now, quarterback-wise, Carson Wentz and Dak Prescott are saying, no, it's a pretty good idea to go quarterback for the Washington Redskins here to try to avoid Chase Young over the next decade or so. It seems like the easy pick to make, but we've seen regimes, especially Daniel Snyder, sometimes go off the grid and say, we need our franchise quarterback. You didn't like the one you had last year. There's 2 out there. We can really market them because the Redskins is, obviously being an NFL team, is big business, but they can't pass up Chase Young, or can they, Teddy?
I don't think they can. And, there are no locks in the world. Okay.
Yep.
But Burrow 1, Young 2 is as pretty close to a lock as you're going to find. And, we're seeing, I saw minus 450 on that. I think it was yesterday. And if that's still, that's value, minus 450, because those 2 guys are going 1 and 2. I'd lay even higher than that. I can't say. And when you talk about the position of importance in the NFL, quarterback's number 1. Edge rusher might well be number 2. Edge rusher makes your whole defense. So I don't think there's any question Washington makes this move. It's a move they need, and it's a player who has the potential to have an impact from day one.
Draft really opens up at number 3 here, because the Lions seemingly set they have their quarterback who's still in his early 30s and can give you multiple Pro Bowl years, maybe even play into his 40s, who knows. But when you have a defensive-minded head coach, there's good players on the board here, obviously, at number 3. But if it's me, Gary, I'm going to trade out of this pick here. I'm going to look to get multiple picks in this spot, maybe trade back down. Now, some people think, hey, they can get their quarterback of the future. 2 is going to be there. Herbert's going to be there. But a lot of things open up at 3. You're the GM of the Detroit Lions. Are you going, I'm taking best available, or am I going to look to improve and say, boy, we can stack the deck, pick up another first-round pick, and still get a really good player here in the first round this year if we slide back?
If I'm the Lions, I trade back with either the Chargers or the Dolphins if they are offering a little more, right? I think the player that they really want is Jeff Okudah from Ohio State. Cornerback, look, they were 29th in the league in defensive back rating last year. They were not good on that side of the ball. That secondary needs a lot of help. Jeff Okudah could do a lot, and I think that they can pick him up a little bit later. I don't know that Okudah would go to the Giants. I think the Giants need offensive line help fiercely. And anybody that's going to trade into that pick is going to trade for a quarterback. So at that point, I think you can move back to 5 or 6. You start getting out of that top 10 range, you may not be able to find the guy that you want, but I think that's where the Lions are going to go. I think, like I said in a previous video, if you need a backup for Matthew Stafford, who is still firing on all cylinders, I know he had the injury last year, but the guy still throws for a ton of yards. He's a fantastic quarterback. Go out and get Jameis Winston. You've got guys that you can pick up for a little less, and you don't have to waste a first-round pick on a quarterback right now because you don't need a quarterback of the future just yet.
Ian, wheeling and dealing at that 3rd spot for the Lions, because seemingly that's the spot where one of those quarterbacks is going to land, whether it be Herbert or Tua Tagovailoa. And it would make sense to me if you're the Lions. You can slide back to maybe 5 or 6, depending if the Chargers want to come up or the Miami Dolphins want to come up and get their quarterback. You can flip-flop those picks, maybe even pick up an extra second-rounder or even a future first-rounder. There's a lot the Lions could do. Or Darius Slay goes to Philadelphia. You have that obvious void for a top-flight cornerback. and you can go and get your man right there, Jeff Okudah, since he'll still be on the board. What are you doing, Ian, as the GM?
Yeah, Gary said it. I think that's exactly what they're doing. I think they're trading down. If they traded down out of this pick, Jeff Okudah makes perfect sense. That secondary for the Lions is not very great to begin with. Perilously thin now after trading Darius Slay to your Philadelphia Eagles, Donnie Rightside. So to me, this is an obvious thing for the Detroit Lions to do. They don't need to be going for a first-round quarterback draft. If you're going to draft a quarterback in the top 10, especially in the first round, it better be you're dire need of a franchise quarterback. You're in dire need of a quarterback. The Detroit Lions aren't that team. They'll trade back, I would think, with either the Dolphins or the Chargers and still be able to get a guy that is going to desperately fill a position of need for them in that secondary with Jeff Okudah. And let's not forget, it's Matt Patricia, the head coach, defensive-minded guy. He's going to be really thinking, I think, defense. We need to address that with what the pick we make. And the guy we most likely want the most, we're going to still be able to get him even if we trade down. So I do think trading down is something the Lions will end up doing.
Teddy, let's put you right in the boardroom here, draft room style with the Ford family. They come to you and say, Teddy, what are we going to do here at 3? We're on the board. Help us.
Well, let's start with this, all right? Normally, all the teams have their war rooms. Everyone's together, and much easier to process trade offers on draft day. This is not going to be easy to process and decide on trade offers and on draft day in very short windows, given the technological limitations that we have. I would expect, if you ask me over under first round draft trades, I'll take the under this year. I just think they're going to be hard to pull off. Second issue with Detroit. This is not a we can trade down in the draft type of team because you have a coach and a GM that ain't going to be there next year if they don't win this year. So every move Detroit makes, front office and head coach, is win now, be in the playoffs this year. If Detroit doesn't finish 500, they're gone. They're gone. So there's none of this, hey, well, let's pick up some draft capital for the new GM and the new coaching staff next year. It's what moves can we make to win right now? Third issue with the Lions, when you grade out the cornerbacks, there's only one that grades out in the top half of the first round. There's 3 or 4 others, the kid from LSU, the kid from Alabama, there's the kid from Florida that are all grade out in the bottom of the first round. But there's only one that grades out in the top half of the first round. So if the Lions say, all right, well, let's trade down just a little bit, they could lose their guy and then they're stuck. And then, oops, maybe we shouldn't have traded Slay. So normally with most organizations, I'm a big proponent of anytime a team's going to offer you something for your pick, you make that trade. Look at the Saints and the Dolphins and the Ricky Williams deal is your classic example of how to fleece teams that want somebody. You always make that move, but only if you're secure in your job, which Matt Patricia isn't, which means they got to get the best guy to win this year. And that, of course, is the cornerback out of Ohio State, Okudah. I don't think the Lions will trade that pick.
Teddy, bring up a good point there because, look, no NFL GM and no NFL head coach wants to set up the next football coach with his players. They do want to win now. It is a win-now league and certainly makes a valid point there. Gary, bringing you back into the conversation. We're going to slide down to number 4 here in the NFC East. 2 teams in the NFC East drafting in the top 5. Now we're going to go take a look at the Giants. And again, the board is wide open here because if I look at the board, Chase Young, Joe Burrow, Jeff Okudah seems to be the consensus top 3 picks. Now it starts to open up. And if you think Daniel Jones is your quarterback of the future for the Giants, obviously you're not going to sit there and take Tua Tagovailoa or maybe Herbert in that position. But now you can wheel and deal in that spot, and even looking the same way that the Lions maybe could trade out, the Giants could do the same. Or do you stand pat and say, you know what? I need protection up front for my young kids in the backfield, being a running back and quarterback. That's where I'm going to stay. Or we could trade down. What are we looking at here?
They need offensive line help badly. Now, whether it's Jedrick Wills or Mekhi Becton or any number of different people, the kid from Iowa, etc., I don't think Gettleman is the kind of guy to trade out of that pick. I think that they're going to stand pat. Unless they get offered a king's ransom again, I don't think they do anything there other than take their guy. That's just what the Giants are. That's what they continue to do. I would look for them to probably take Tristan Wirfs. But any of the offensive line that are top 10 worthy could be taken in that spot, and I think that's what they stand to do.
Ian, if we take a look at the Giants in this spot, because also we talk about fortifying maybe a defensive line or an offensive line, but let's also not forget this is a deep, deep draft at wide receiver. You can never help your young quarterback enough. And also, you did trade one of those really good wide receivers over to the Cleveland Browns and Odell Beckham Jr. So that is wide open. If you're the GM of the Giants, what are you doing, Ian?
Yeah, I think it's you draft an O-lineman. You drafted Andrew Thomas, I think, out of Georgia, or Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa, Jedrick Wills. But I like Andrew Thomas, really, from Georgia. I thought he was outstanding. He played in the rough and tumble SEC against, pretty good competition throughout the course of the season. And in terms of allowing quarterback pressures and sacks, I mean, Andrew Thomas was excellent in that regard. You look at all his metrics in that category were fantastic. At Georgia. And you look at the New York Giants, they still need to shore up the offensive line. At least now you don't have a statue in Eli Manning. You've got a little bit more mobility there with Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones was criticized for fumbling a bit too much. Yeah, you'd fumble a lot too if there's someone right in your grill 1 second after the ball is snapped, less than that. I mean, you're going to fumble a lot too. I mean, that offensive line was hideous again last year for the New York Giants. I think the O-line's obvious need for them. I think that's where they go at number 4.
Should be interesting here, Ted. I'm going to bring you in because, again, you're going to play front office here, and I'm a fan of the New York Giants. Let's say, Teddy, I don't want to see an offensive lineman drafted number 4. I want that Ferrari pick. Give me the sexy pick. But, Teddy, tell me what the right pick is here for the Giants.
So the Giants are a team that should trade down if they get the opportunity to do so. They have a position of need. They need a tackle, okay? It's not a question. And if you say, what's the most important position for the Giants to draft, that fan who's saying, well, get at the Ferrari, no. Okay, you protect your Ferrari, get a garage. All right.
Good one.
But unlike the cornerback position on the offensive line, and we've heard the names already, Andrew Thomas, we've heard Becton from Louisville, we've heard Wirfs from Iowa, Willis from Alabama. There's 4 guys that are projected to be in the top half of the first round. So you can trade down, and even if there's 2 of the guys you like and 2 you don't, you can still find somebody else. It's not like the cornerback position we were just talking about where there's only 1 guy that's projected in that range. Here there's 4. So if there's someone you love, yeah, you get that guy. But realistically, I'm trading down given the opportunity and still being able to pick up one of the 4 top half of the first round offensive linemen that can protect Daniel Jones and keep that Ferrari safe.
Let's take a look here at the last pick in the top 5 goes to the Dolphins. Gary, the steak and the sizzle right here. South Beach, we need our quarterback. We have a plethora of draft picks. Let's put our foot on the gas pedal and take it off of the brake pedal like they've been over the past couple years. Do you make the decision to go out and get your man at quarterback, or are you just going to say, hey, we're not going to slow play this right here. We're going to take the best player available, who to me will be a quarterback. Gary, what are we thinking here for the Dolphins at 5?
I think they want Tua Tagovailoa. I think they will try to trade up to possibly number 3. I don't think the Redskins trade out of that 2 spot. I think they'll try to trade to either 3 or 4. I don't think the Lions are going to take a quarterback. So if you can trade even just a little bit with the Giants, you don't have to give up maybe 2 of those first-round picks. I would trade up and go ahead and get Tua. Now, there's a lot of talk, obviously, about maybe they like Justin Herbert more, et cetera. Either way, it would make a lot of sense for you to move up and go ahead and get your guy as opposed to waiting on the Chargers or somebody else to move in front of you. 5 normally wouldn't be too low. If I were them, I would try and make some deals and use some of those picks that you have. I mean, you've got 2 coming up next year. You've got 3 first-rounders this year. Use some of those picks. Go up and get your guy. Make sure you are set for the future.
If we take a look here, Ian, at this pick here, number 5 to the Dolphins, and look, we're in a different day and age here where information can usually flow very easily, but that's not going to be the case being with Tua Tagovailoa. Devastating injury last year. All the medicals seem good, but you can't work them out yourself. You're the GM. Does that give you a little bit of pause at 5 and say, boy, we really want Tua, but I don't want to make that decision if he has any, tendonitis or any, arthritis in the hip moving forward here, Ian? What are we doing as the Dolphins here?
And that's the elephant in the room with Tua Tagovailoa right now. It's the injury set situation. It's the health situation going into this draft. It's do the Miami Dolphins risk maybe looking to at another quarterback, not picking at 5, trading out of it. There's all kinds of different ways. This is where the shenanigans and the circus that is the NFL draft could really begin with the Miami Dolphins. We know quarterback is obviously a huge position of need for them. I still think when push comes to shove, everybody's saying the medicals for Tua are fine. In terms of the higher ceiling, the higher upside, he's got that, I think, over a guy like Justin Herbert. Now, Justin Herbert didn't have the greatest season last year, and of course, down the stretch, he struggled a little bit. People raving now, and everyone's it's amazing how your Mel Kipers and all these guys are just in love with the Senior Bowl performance for Justin Herbert. I don't know. I prefer game action. I prefer what you did in the season rather than just the Senior Bowl, and all of a sudden you were so good in that game, and that overrides what was a kind of an up and down season for Justin Herbert. I don't think so. So when push comes to shove, I think Miami sticks with their guns here. They'll either trade down or take Tua. I'll say they take Tua here at 5.
Tanking for Tua here, Teddy's what the Miami Dolphins fans are talking all year long. Never in their wildest dreams would they have think if they finished 5th that they would still get Tua. He might be on the board. What are we doing with this pick, Teddy? Number 5 overall to the Miami Dolphins.
So if I'm the Dolphins GM and I'm going up and down my roster, I say, where's my biggest weakness? Not quarterback. Not close to quarterback. Fitzpatrick was fine. Miami's 2 or 3 years away from contending for a Super Bowl. I kick that can down the road. All right. I go with Fitzpatrick again, and I try to get as many pieces in place for whoever the franchise quarterback's going to be. And you say, well, what kind of strategy is that? It worked pretty well for the Steelers with Roethlisberger, or the Patriots with Brady or whatever. I mean, teams can come in with young quarterbacks and have success when the pieces are there around them. So if I'm Miami, someone wants to trade up, give me more draft capital. They have an extraordinary amount of draft capital, and they blew a bunch of money in free agency because they had it to blow because they have all of this draft capital. It means they're going to get all these guys on relatively cheap deals and fairly talented players. So if I'm Miami, I'm shoring up every hole I have before I move to the quarterback position. I do not draft Tua. And if I can, I'll trade down and get more picks because the Dolphins rebuild. This is not a team that's going to the Super Bowl in 2020 or 2021. Miami's thinking about 2022, 2023, 2024. And if you can build a base for that now, that's where they're supposed to be doing.
About 3 weeks out from the NFL draft, a lot of stuff to go over. It's fun talking with my esteemed panel, Gary Seegers, Ian Cameron, and Teddy Savranti, going over some possibilities of where these players might land in the NFL draft. Thanks again for tuning into another episode of SportsBookReview.com's Roundtable Series videos. We'll keep you informed right here on everything in the NFL draft at SportsBookReview.com.